Illinois has just added a new piece of agricultural history to a McLean County cornfield. This morning, dozens of people came out to Shirley to see the new historical marker recognizing Edie Funk and the Funk Brothers Seed Company and their impact on farming. The Funk Brothers Seed Company produced a higher yielding corn crop that was more resistant to disease, which is known as the Funk's G-Series hybrid. The dedicated marker highlights how the agriculture research done on that same soil has helped shape modern farming for more than a century.
This is where the corn was bred. This is where they did the experiments. So this is scientific ground. This is we're in the middle of a scientific laboratory, and it's still being used today for that purpose.
This marker is meant to preserve the history that the Funk Brothers and Company created and keep as a reminder of the importance of agriculture, not only in McLean County, but everywhere else.